Hey, so as the title suggests, this is going to be why atheism is a necessary evil. Though that's a weird title, I know, but it'll make sense as I get further into the video, especially considering that I'm an atheist. So this was a thought I had just a few hours ago while I was working out, and it's probably not an original thought, but it's one that I don't think is explored enough within atheist circles, as it's a very good debate point against religion. And that is that ultimately, no matter what religious view you are, you should at least somewhat support the existence of secularism and atheism in this world. And the reason for that being that religions are not all one and the same. Okay, and if you don't realize that, FYI, you really need to learn more about other religions. There may be some commonalities amongst them: Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, etc., etc. But they have enormous differences. Their gods are not one and the same. Their gods have enormously different personalities, enormously different commandments, enormously different lifestyles that they demand of their followers. There are some similarities too, but they are not one and the same. Even Christianities, the denominations there are so different. I don't know how people sometimes can even see them as the same religion. But anyways, let's say hypothetically one of these religions is true. I'll just pick Christianity because it's the one I grew up with and the one I'm most familiar with. Well, even if you think atheism is wrong, even if you think there is, a God, even if you believe all that, atheism is necessary and that it is also limiting the spread of other religions. And for that reason alone, you should always support at least some level of atheism and secularism in this world, including in your country. Because FYI, that's part of the reason all the denominations like Protestants and Catholics don't fight as much as they used to, is because they're just losing ground in general. And they, with an increasingly secular society, there's less reason for them to fight with each other. But ultimately, even if you think atheism is a negative thing in the world, it is impossible for you to see it as a purely negative thing, because it, at the very, very least, is fighting always at least against some bad religious ideas. And if you don't think that there are at least a significant number of bad religions or bad religious ideas out there, let me just tell you this very delicately: you are too stupid to ever have a coherent thought, and you need to seriously grow a brain before you hurt yourself or someone else around you. If that's not putting it a little bit too, delicate. Okay, I'm making an idiot of myself. Sorry. What I mean is that, I've spent a lot of time around religious Christians growing up, and there are very good people and very smart people, but there are very, very devious intentions within the world of religion, and not just Christianity, within Islam, within Hinduism, within all of them. And there are very smart people that hold these ideas. Smart people can hold very stupid ideas, and you can also have very devious intentions mixed in with good intentions. Human psychology is a very complicated thing. And FYI, that goes for atheists too. Not all atheists are good people. Not all atheists are smart people. Okay? That's one reason why, even though I'm making it a bigger part of my life as I get older, I kind of try to limit the part it is in my life, because I don't want atheism to be my sole, defining thing in my existence, which is essentially just the lack of a religion or the lack of theism, But I'm getting on a tangent here, sorry. Point just being, ultimately, no matter what way you slice it, atheism is necessary in the world, because being the lack of theism, and it spreads the lack of theism in certain parts of the world, it is combating forms of theism that you don't agree with. And in theory, if you really truly believe that your religion is the one true religion, then it is allowing the field to be cleared for it to grow in other areas. Now, I don't believe that actually is the case, of course. I don't think there is a one true religion, but hypothetically, if I was wrong, that would still be the case. So almost no matter what way you look at it, atheism is a necessary thing, and secularism is a necessary thing in this world. And the only way that could even begin to actually go against that way of thinking is if you are one of those people who believes that religion of all religions of all types, are all well-intentioned do-gooderism, and they all are positive within society. Not that I'm saying that religions don't have maybe some positive elements to them, But if you really honestly view religion that positively in the 21st century, that you just see all religions as a good thing automatically, once again, I'm just going to put it delicately, please, please, please grow a brain before you hurt yourself or someone else around you. Okay? Um, Again, I will admit to you, not even all atheists are smart or good-intentioned people, but sure as hell, I can promise you, not all religions are. And religions, on the whole, have done and still do a lot of bad in the world. Okay? And people that, I find those, the only thing worse than like the cultural religious types who think their religion is all good are the people that literally try to sing kumbaya and say all the religions are good in the world except evil, evil atheists. Those people are just generally people that can't actually handle a little slight dosage of facts being injected into the debate because they like just being high on themselves and they hate being corrected by those evil, evil atheists, And I know I'm being pretty salty here. I'll take it down maybe a few notches. But point just being, if just FYI, in case you haven't noticed, this is one of my biggest pet peeves as an atheist, are people who believe that all other religions are just innocent, stupid do-gooders, because that's both an insult to what I grew up with, the religious fundamentalists, and it's an insult to atheists. It essentially is saying that on both sides, people are too stupid to understand, what the other side is even saying. And only us in the middle, who usually haven't actually spent that much time engrossed in this issue or this debate, we're the only ones that understand it. Well, I can assure you, that is not the case. There are some atheists and fundamentalists on both sides who are too wrapped up in their perspective to see it. And there are some moderates in the middle who are a very good force. However, I can promise you a lot of atheists have had a lot of experience with religion, and a lot of religious people. There are actually some very tolerant fundamentalists out there of atheists. For instance, my former Bible teacher, who I had from I think 6th grade through 12th grade, me and him got along pretty well back in the day. We both had kind of similar, bland, boring personalities. When I actually told him that I was an atheist some years after I became one in a private message on Facebook, and he was very open about it. I was very respectful in my approach towards him. I didn't come out, swinging or anything. And I just told him, I know we are polar opposite ends of the spectrum, but I know that you actually do take your beliefs seriously, and I do respect that. And that's something I respect, more than a Christian who doesn't take their own beliefs seriously and doesn't really care, And we had a relatively good semi-debate, semi-discussion. He was probably more mature about it than me because I was still very new to being an atheist at the time, and still am kind of. And he's been a fundamentalist for decades and has probably had many, many students come back and tell him he's wrong. And probably he found me less annoying than the ones who come back and tell him, a Bible guy who's been a Bible teacher his whole life, saying, you need to read the Bible, John. That's his name, John. You need to read the Bible, and you need to actually, pay attention to what's written in it. Okay, fundamentalists read the Bible all the freaking time, and that's why they interpret it in such a conservative way. The Bible was written thousands of years ago. It is a predominantly conservative book, and that is why you shouldn't treat it like a holy book. That's also why you should treat it with, just in general, a lot of skepticism like you treat any book. But point just being, just kind of circling back, and I'm going on a lot of tangents, but I'm about done. Ultimately, at the end of the day, atheism is absolutely a necessity in this world. Even though I think in the future, I don't think we have to eliminate religion in order for, for us all to get along, in order for it all to work, or what my ideal vision would be, or what most atheists' ideal vision is. I don't see one in which religion is eliminated. I just see one which would be somewhat similar to how Japan is now, where the majority of people identify as non-religious, preferably openly identifying as atheist or agnostic, and a good chunk maybe still identify as Christian, Buddhist, whatever, but for the most part it's been gutted of any real, hardcore fundamentalist, or just, for lack of a better word, bad beliefs. To be blunt, the belief that any books from thousands of years ago are infallible and can't be contradicted, the belief that an invisible sky king, his orders must be obeyed above anything else, and FYI, only the priests who, have the secret formula that he's giving them, when they're in private sessions with him, know what this formula is. These are, or obviously the really, really bad things, like people who, outright murder people that don't share their religious views. I think that's pretty obvious, though. But I mean, what I'm just saying is that that's an ideal world for me. Something similar to how Japan is now in terms of how they deal with religion, where it has just been greatly minimized in society, and people who take it like really, really seriously are viewed with a lot of skepticism and maybe even just a small degree of ostracization. Again, not violent, not aggressive, but I mean, like, a parent denying their kid medicine, yeah, for good reason, that would be treated with pretty significant both social and legal ostracizations, really extreme behaviors. And luckily, we're kind of already there in society. But that is my, I guess, ideal atheist world, But ultimately, that world is and even if you disagree with it, even if you believe the world should be predominantly Christian, you've got to allow some degree of atheism in this world, because you've got to understand it is almost impossible. It never has. So at any point in history has Christianity single-handedly taken over the world, The same is true of Islam. The same is true of Hinduism, and et cetera, et cetera. And probably the only way it would actually be really possible is with some degree of atheism and secularism being in the world, because they limit all the other religions, and hypothetically, they're clearing the field for the one true religion. Who knows? Maybe we'll discover some ancient religion actually was right, and I don't know, back thousands of years ago, they figured out the one true God, and all the gods since then have been the wrong gods. Maybe hypothetically we'll figure that out. I don't think so, but I mean, let's put it this way: it makes more sense than that the idiots that go around saying all religions are equally true and they all lead to heaven and it's all good, and atheists are just a bunch of bad, mean, ugly, fat, pale dudes on the internet, ranting on their webcams, so they're just bad and ugly. Don't listen to them, it's starting to go off and ditch a little bit here, but you get my point. This is a point that, where I'm going with this, atheists need to make this point more often, because ultimately, I think it's a very good one to make, and I don't think very many religious people give it enough credit, because they only see atheism as a threat within their own country, and at the end of the day, they rarely think outside of their perspectives on this, and even some atheists don't think outside of their own perspectives. They just think, here in the U.S., there's atheists versus Christians, and there aren't that many other religions to really fret about, though they're starting to fret a little bit about Muslims, Same is true in Islamic countries, though over there they still have a lot of antipathy towards Christians. Ultimately, there is almost no way for this world to move forward without atheism and secularism being a very critical part of it, even if hypothetically one of the religions is true. So I think that's a thought that, while I know someone else has probably put it more eloquently and with a much better video quality than myself, it's one that needs to be explored further by both atheists and religious people, because, at the end of the day, we all do kind of have to work together. I mean, I'm not interested in killing anyone for their views. I'm not interested in forcing my views onto my coworkers, family, or friends. And I ultimately, and as you can imagine, I would not like to have the same done to me. So whatever path we all end up going forward in the coming decades, it's going to be one where we have to at least somewhat get along, And I don't think it's going to be one where atheism is going to conquer the world anytime real soon, and I don't even know that I want that, In a weird way, like the Joker said to Batman in The Dark Knight, he's like, you complete me, when he's talking to Batman. Like, why would I kill you? What would I do without you? Well, the same was kind of true with me, I've spent half of my life being on both the one extreme, growing up as a religious fundamentalist and getting a lot of grief for it from both moderate Christians and atheists, and now I'm an atheist and I get all sorts of grief from all the fundamentalists in my life and some moderate Christians. It's, if I suddenly tomorrow the atheism conquered the world and religion went away, to some extent I would just be an anomaly. It'd be like, what is the whole purpose of all my ranting and all my life on that, And I'm joking just a little bit here, but point just being, I mean, I don't think most people want to get rid entirely of the other religion, or of atheists. But ultimately, sometimes I think some people fail to look at the big picture of this, of atheists and Christians, of, all of us. We sometimes fail to realize, that at the end of the day, to some small extent, we do have to live with the others. And whether you like it or not, as the final point of this video, ultimately, all religions, to some extent, need atheism and secularism. So, if you disagree, feel free to say so in the comments. As usual, thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye.